All right, well, welcome. And I hope we are having a really good day to our Wednesday. And so hopefully have a good start. Today, I want to continue with the study of the Great Depression, and we will be continuing with our looking at different case studies and kind of wrap up the United States in terms of approach by our two presidents, Hoover and FDR, and then move on and see how other countries in the Americas were approaching and trying to find solutions to the Great Depression in their respected countries. After all, this is a global depression. It's not just exclusively inside the borders of the United States. It has transcended and has covered multiple nations, again, global. All right. And so you want to make sure, if you haven't, and so if I take care of some housekeeping items, you want to make sure that you have submitted the critics of the New Deal, and that we're just simply staying on top of our assignments. And you can anticipate that this week I'll start sending out some notices about a few reminders, and that we need to be a little bit more diligent in getting stuff in. All right. So you can see our agenda as well for the day, this class period. All right. Before we start, anyone have anything good for the cause? All right. So each day, trying to spotlight some aspect of Black history. And so I like to continue to do that as well. And so the spotlight today is really going to be on a well-known athlete, and his name is James Cleveland Owens, simply known as Jesse Owens. And he will get his claim to fame during the Great Depression era. And he is a well-known Olympiad. And so he will represent the United States in the 1936 games. And so, but a little background with him is that, he's known for his athletic accomplishments, but this is a very interesting time period in which an African-American athlete is rising to notoriety during a very turbulent time period inside the United States and also globally as well. He attended Ohio State. He won a number of NCAA championships. In 1935, he set some world records. So it's kind of a little preview of what he will potentially accomplish in the 1936 games. And in 1936, the games are going to be in all places, Germany, Berlin, Germany. And Adolf Hitler has rose to power. He became chancellor in 1933, and set about creating a new German state, an Aryan state. And Jesse Owens is going to puncture some holes in their theories. In the 1936 games, he does win 4 golds, and we can see in the number of track and field events. Defying Hitler, in many ways, Hitler thought the Olympics would prove Aryan superiority. I will say in 1936, in that particular Olympic Games, Germany did win the majority of, or had the most medals. If we look at the medal count number, I don't have in front of me, but I do know they came first, the United States came second. So Hitler thought he could showcase his Aryan society and superiority, and Owens proved otherwise. Still, though, his success at the Olympics is going to pave the way and set the stage for other athletes to come such as Jackie Robinson in the 1940s. All right. And so I have a little video clip here of some of his accomplishments, his Olympic accomplishments here. So let's take a look at that.
Now the amazing Owens again. First Owens of America, a new world record.
Of course, we got to have some advertisement in there as well. And so when we look at some things that he may have said, though, you know, although I wasn't invited to shake hands with Hitler, I wasn't invited to the White House to shake hands with the president either, with FDR. Again, speaking to perhaps the degree of segregation and racism that did exist in the United States. And even though FDR's administration was a little bit more inclusive than previous ones, still still a lot has to occur. Still a lot of room for growth. The battle that count aren't the ones for gold medals. The struggle within yourself, the invisible, inevitable battles inside of all of us. That's where it's at. I mean, he knew what he was doing was big. It was special, but at the same time, he was very grounded to earth and focusing, you know, about the individual and the role the individual has in improving themselves, and by improving themselves, they are improving society in general. All right. And so also I think is extraordinary is not only the accomplishments of Jesse Owens at the games, but many of his fellow African-American athletes also are going to have some success here as well. And so again, extraordinary visual in front of us. What is, if you look at this visual, what kind of stands out? What are some kind of standout moments, takeaway moments in this visual? If anyone has any comments. Well, you have Jesse Owens up there on top. You know, he's saluting the American flag as it's being our anthem's being played as well. But then you also have the swastika, or excuse me, the saluting, the fascist saluting. You know, which something is associated with fascism, not just in Germany, but in other fascist countries as well. And the mandatoriness of that salute. So what a contrast, you know. And so the imagery of the 1936 Olympics is very powerful as well. All right. So I want to wrap up a little bit with the critics of the New Deal. So I want to move away from this and go to our task at hand with the Great Depression, and put some finishing touches on the critics of the New Deal. So when we look at FDR's approach to solving the Great Depression, it is a lot different than Herbert Hoover. And we had evaluated Herbert Hoover, and he doesn't get great evaluations about his approach. He's not ranked very high, as we found out, amongst the other presidents, but FDR is. And with that said, it doesn't mean he doesn't have any critics, as your reading had pointed out. So in the chat, I'm going to put a link to a Jamboard in which I want you to put your thoughts on whether or not FDR and has gone too far or not far enough, and base that on the criticism that his critics have directed at him. So here we go. Let me put this link in there, and hopefully everyone gets it. And hopefully I remember to give everyone editor status so you can add some points there. But just put down kind of your takeaway to this. All right. Let's see. Yeah. So put down there examples of criticism that if he's gone too far, maybe, you know, taxes come to mind here as maybe too far, or maybe he didn't go far enough and this is what he needs to include. Think of what maybe some of what the critics were saying about the bank or about old age, or just something about playing Robin Hood and sharing the wealth. All right, take a moment. Let's do that. Let's put some thoughts down on it. So what were some of the criticism? Ultimately, what we're looking at, what were some of the criticisms of the New Deal? Put down, like, you know, a takeaway with that. All right, so I see some good points. All right. There's at least 24 of us in this class. I would like to see a little bit more if I haven't articulated it well. All right, so far what I'm seeing is the criticism is highlighting some issues that perhaps those that are right of the spectrum. All right, and those can be viewed as valid concerns as the legislation is being passed. Is there going to be some restrictions to my liberties, or to you know, if we are a free market society here as a business owner, am I being restricted? And if I'm very successful, Uncle Sam's going to ask for me to open up my wallet. All right. I don't show the tax codes of the 1930s, but if we saw the tax codes, you'd be surprised by the amount of tax brackets that there are out there. Today we have really about 4 or 5 tax brackets. Back then, you could probably multiply it by 3. Okay, so I see a few points there, a few ideas. I would like to see a little bit more. Again, if I haven't articulated, this is part of, you'll hear me repeat myself over time. We can be there and have the be there experience. Be there and do something also is part of the experience. All right, so I think today you're getting a little bit of Mr. Newcomb unplugged. And it's nice to see some more ideas there. And so again, when you're looking at these criticisms, whether or not we got to provide pension for the elderly, or whether or not the banks need to be nationalized or thrown more under federal control, get the Federal Reserve to do a little bit more here. The Supreme Court, all right, the Supreme Court has been at this time was being viewed as a critic of the New Deal, because if I look here, what is the U.S. Supreme Court doing that is upsetting FDR? Either someone could put that on there or just on mic. What's the Supreme Court doing to some of his programs? Yes, I see there on this jam board, made some things unconstitutional, and so that's a check. That's a check that the Supreme Court, the court system, has on our president, but also on the legislative branches. They can just rule things unconstitutional. And so what FDR tried to do then was, all right, you're going to make some of my laws unconstitutional. We're going to do something about it. All right, we're going to do something. Does anyone know what he tries to do?
He added more judges, or more seats at least.
Say that again.
He added more seats. All
right. Well, he attempted to add more seats. It was he tried to get Congress to go along with the idea of expanding the size of the Supreme Court, moving away from 9 old men, because that's what we had on the Supreme Court back then, 9 old men who are there for life, and has been very conservative for many years in interpreting the Constitution. And we hear that a lot. How do you interpret the Constitution? Strictly, word for word, or do you interpret it, look at it as a living document, and interpret it with the context of the time period? And so he was upset, wanted Congress to go along with his scheme of expanding it to as much as 15. And his thought was, if we can expand it to 15, I could put some of my New Deal judges on there and pretty much allow him to have his laws withstand the constitutional test of it. And so again, this is where we talk about, wielding extreme amount of powers. It backfired. He didn't get it, but it may have worked in the end, because the judges kind of took notice and they started easing off of going after some of these New Deal legislation pieces. All right. So again, I appreciate those who have put some thoughts down on the jam board, and I know sometimes it's uncomfortable like that, but again, let's get involved in the process. Okay. All right. What we can look at, though, with the critics, and this is my final thought of the critics, and then I move on, is their criticism in some ways did influence New Deal legislation, like the passing of Social Security would be an example, where Dr. Townsend had talked about old age pension, giving elderly a monthly check, but they would have to spend it to help stimulate the economy. It did convince FDR to bring in some of those elements and create Social Security, which we still have with us today. Did these critics really become a significant threat? Perhaps maybe one of them, Huey Long, is probably the closest to being a threat to FDR's New Deal program. but as we know, Huey Long had been assassinated, and so that threat was ever present in the by 1936. Still, though, FDR is going to have to take notice on what was his message and take into consideration some of those points. All right. So what I would like to do, though, is now look at how does this Great Depression look like outside the United States? All right, this is history of the Americas, and so we do want to look at how it is affecting nations like Canada and Mexico. I do have a little video clip that kind of highlights the immediate effect of the Great Depression on another country in the Americas, and it will be Chile. So I think, with this video clip, what I want you to get from it, or at least look at it, is how is the Depression impacting the country of Chile in terms of its immediacy. How quick did it hit it? All right. So let's watch, I'd say maybe about 5 minutes of this little clip here, and then we'll jump into really our last task at hand, and that is looking at our neighbor to the north, Canada.
As people had less to spend and trade slowed, more factories closed in one country after another. It seemed unstoppable forces were at work, which individual governments could do nothing to control. In South America, countries like Chile suffered immediately because they depended on trade with the United States. Chile's copper miners had prospered in the 1920s. But the good times were over. Fernando Liborio had just started work.
Cuando vino el crash en Estados Unidos,
when the crash happened in the United States, quite honestly, nothing like it had ever been known before.
No había conocimiento de algo semejante.
It was as if you were walking along the street and suddenly something hit you.
Y queda aturdido. Porque esto estaba muy lejano.
To us, it all seemed very remote, miles away. New York was a long way off.
Pero en cambio, cuando a uno le
But when your own boss tells you you haven't got a job anymore, then you really felt it.
Entonces, sencillamente, ahí sí que hay impacto fuerte.
Copper brought in 80% of Chile's foreign earnings. Tens of thousands worked to prize it from the biggest man-made hole in the world, in the desert of Chuquicamata. Justo Ballesteros was a contractor to the mine company.
Con ese crash de Wall Street, sencillamente, se cerraron fábricas.
After this crash in Wall Street, factories in the United States closed and they stopped buying. They stopped buying copper and all the raw materials produced here. This paralyzed the market here and so directly affected the entire working population. People were ruined, companies went bust. It was a crisis.
The slump was even more devastating for Chileans who produced nitrates, shipped to farmers all over the world as fertilizer.
El pan de nosotros era la salitrera.
The nitrate works was our daily bread. It was our security. There wasn't anything else. Where else were we going to work when the desert was so vast?
Claudina Montaño Diaz's family were all nitrate workers.
Un día en diciembre, nosotros en nuestra casa, pues ya
One
mi
day in
marido
December, we
llegaba
were
de
at home
trabajar.
and my husband came
Y
back
me
from
decía,
work.
"Fíjate que va
Listen, he
a
said,
parar", me
they're
decía
closing
la
it down,
cocina.
and
Así
we
que
had to
tal
go.
fecha tenemos que
Soon they were
irnos.
sending the
Y a
people
poco
away.
iban repartiendo la gente. Y la gente humilde, ¿qué iba a hacer?
And what could the poor people do? Pick up their suitcases and accept whatever happened. Who could we turn to?
Tantos pueblos para el norte, todo eso quedaba abandonado.
So many towns in the north
Pueblos
abandoned,
grandes,
all abandoned.
todo quedaba
That was the
abandonado.
crisis of
Esa fue
1930.
la crisis del 30.
Thousands of unemployed miners headed for the capital, Santiago. The government, now bankrupt, was overwhelmed by the numbers. Fernando Liborio was better off than most. He had somewhere to stay.
Entonces mi tía me llama en la mañana, me dice,
My aunt called me one morning and said, look what's going on in the street.
nosotros por la ventana,
We looked out of the window and saw them lifting people up by the feet and arms and piling them onto a cart. I asked if they were drunk, but they weren't drunk. They were dead. They died of hunger.
Okay, so again, I always talk about historical nuggets. There's a lot of good historical nuggets when we look at the Great Depression outside the United States. But if we look at what happened in Chile and the United States or in other places, what we find is that how connected economies are to each other. And we always talk about a global, this geo-economic system of economies today that are very connected in many ways, and we do try to find ways to kind of carve out our niche and protect our space as well. That's why we got tariffs and all that stuff. But even back then, how connected the economies were. So when the crash happened in the United States, its immediate effect was in Chile. You saw it. But one thing that we look at countries like Chile and even in Canada is the amount of export. And perhaps with that export, the idea of resources, all right, are being exported out of those countries. But many of those companies, too, also have ties with American companies. We always hear about multi-international corporations. And it's no different back then. In Minnesota, we have 3M as probably the most notable international or multinational corporation. Back then, Ford Motor Company would be an example of it. Any of the chemical plants like DuPont would be part of that as well. And so you see that impact. Okay. So really what you should do here is let's move on to into Schoology here for the assignment. And that assignment has taken us to Canada. I did open that up today. And so you'll see this Canada and the Great Depression. And so what we are looking at, we're looking at Canada, and Canada will be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then next week, we'll take a look at Mexico. And what we want to do is always look at how the Great Depression, what's causing it in the country. How are the governments dealing with it? And in case of Canada, we're looking at Prime Ministers King and Bennett. and then the effectiveness of their solutions. I think if to go back to Chile, what we're going to find is their government is going to simply struggle to figure out a path to do it. They're going to be moving people around and hoping that exports will pick up. And of course, global events are going to allow for that to happen, because some of the things like the copper and the nitrates that is being mined in Chile definitely are going to serve a purpose when it comes to rearmament. But they're really, it's really going to struggle. They're going to really struggle to figure out what is their best path, right? So we want to see for Canada, now going back to Canada here, what is Canada's path to recovery here? All right, and so if you open up the assignment on Schoology, and you'll see that there are some attachments, and you're going to want to use those attachments. But the big assignment here is this. And so when we think of Canada, all right, our neighbor to the north, feel free to put into the chat or verbalize what are some things that come to your mind about Canada? Well, maybe I can help stimulate some of your thoughts here. You know, when we think of Canada today, you know, hockey's really big in Canada, and they for many years had our number in the Olympics and on the world scene with hockey. However, our national team had some success recently here. Produces a lot of great hockey players, like the great one. The flag itself, you know, if we look at it, what is the symbol on the Canadian flag?
It's a maple leaf.
It's the maple leaf, absolutely. And 80% of the maple, 80% of the maple syrup is coming from Canada. So big there. Known for their Tim Horton donuts. Didn't do so well here in Minnesota. We're the land of 10,000 lakes. Well, Canada is the land of about 3 million lakes. And in terms of animals, they have about 50% of the world's population of the polar bear. All right, so there's some fun little trivia pieces there about Canada. But looking at Canada on the eve of the Great Depression, or when the Great Depression is happening, this time period in Canada is really going to be known as kind of like the unlucky 30s or the dirty 30s here. Canada was heavily dependent on global trade, and so we know that trade is going to be greatly impacted by this global depression. So the exports of their agricultural products and mineral resources is really going to be hit by this slowdown on the global trade here. And 30% unemployment. Here in the United States, we're going to have about 25% of Americans unemployed. At the low point of the Great Depression, 1932, well, Canada's going to have about 30%. And if you're in some of the prairie provinces like Saskatchewan, it's going to be hit very, very hard. The maritime provinces were hit a little earlier than in the 1920s by a little bit of slowdown as well. And you start seeing a decline in many areas in Canada, like in birth rates and immigration. And there does seem to be an internal movement towards the rural parts of Canada, which is always very, very interesting here. But very much like the government of Canada, like the government of the United States, it's going to have to go through a change, a re-examination of philosophical views. So with that, this is what we're going to look at here is you're going to have some thought bubbles. All right. We all like thought bubbles. At least I like thought bubbles. And you're going to complete this task by looking at a historian, Mackenzie King, and R.B. Bennett. King and Bennett are the prime ministers of Canada. And so what we're trying to look here is at what is the political and economic causes of the Great Depression in Canada and the nature and the efficiency of the solutions in Canada by King and Bennett. You're to complete the thought bubbles associated with the individuals, and you can see that for these individuals, what their thoughts are going to be about. For the historian, about the causes of the Great Depression. For Mackenzie King, he will actually be prime minister 2 times, but not back to back, from 1925-1930 and then 1935-1939. So we want to take a look at what kind of methods and programs that he comes up with, and then the effectiveness of it. And same with R.B. Bennett. So you can see on the thought bubbles here the titles. So pay attention to it, and you can see that some of the thought bubbles are in green, some of them are in black. That should also indicate you that we're dealing with different time periods. The one in the greens here for King are dealing with 25 to 30, in the black 35 to 39. And then if we look at Bennett here, same thing. Between 1930 and 35, we have 3 thought bubbles in green. They're same time. And then we have some proposed changes. He's going to lose an election. His party's going to lose an election. And so that's why it's proposed, but he doesn't get a chance to really put them in action. So the information for the thought bubbles you can see right here. You want to look for the historian. What were the reasons? And usually come up with 2 to 3 good reasons. Approaches by key people like Bennett and King to solve the Great Depression here, take into consideration their political and economic philosophies and their viewpoints. Examples of methods or programs implemented to solve the crisis. Specific example would be like Bennett's relief camps, King's trade agreement with the U.S., that specificality, just like when we said the New Deal. Give me an example of a New Deal program, and you would say like the Civilian Conservation Corps, that type of stuff. And of course, look at successes or failures of the examples you choose. And then we're always looking for the BHQ, the big historical question: to what extent was Canadian government successful in their response to the Great Depression? So we want to see, were they successful? Or was there other things that brought them out of the Depression here? So to help you with this, we got 2 readings, and they were attached, all right, that we can see right here. I would really focus on those 2, all right, because if you go out there and you start GTSing it, it could lead you to a very scary place, all right? So that's the last resort, okay? This will take you a little while, and so that's why we're giving you today, tomorrow, and Friday to get it done, all right? It's not something that you can just slap together in 20 minutes. It'll take some time, so plot your strategy out. Maybe you focus on historian, then focus on King, then focus on Bennett. Use these headers in the thought bubbles to really kind of focus on where you can find it in the readings. Those can be context clues to help you find the appropriate information. Okay? Is there overall questions about this? Anything that can get clarified at this point? Where I find the information, when's it due, that type of stuff.
It's due on, wait, this Friday, right?
You got it, this Friday, February 5th. Okay. All right. So what I will do, we have a little bit of time left here. And so just to kind of echo what I said at the beginning of the class period, anticipate that this week I will start reaching out to individuals who might be missing a few things and see if we can get on top of that right away. It is a short trimester, so you do need to be very cognizant of the pacing and of those deadlines, and always utilize the office hours to get any concerns addressed at that point as well, or always reach out to me with a message in Schoology or email me and let me know. Plus, I haven't utilized Remind 101, and I'll probably start using Remind 101 as well. So I do have a few ways to reach out and all that stuff. In terms of, when we go back to the hybrid model, we are still learning from our administration what kind of expectations out there. And so, again, like I had sent out an update saying, hey, I will give you an idea of what I think my approach is going to be. And I still will hopefully by Friday, as I learn more information, then I can put together a game plan. But I do anticipate we're going to keep this pacing going. Regardless if it's an A, B, we're going to keep this pacing going, and we're going to keep the live Google Meets as an element of the course as well. And so, and this is something that Ms. Saidi and we have talked about as well. So at least those are a couple of the key points of, the framework that we're going to be working with for the rest of the trimester. All right, enough with that philosophizing and all that stuff. Feel free to stay on the Google Meet, ask me questions, work on this, or exit, and have a great Wednesday.